All right, welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'll be talking about a topic that I think is extremely important in the world, and that is how learning history can change your life. So, just to start off, first I want to go over how not to learn history, because I think this is an especially big problem today and why there is so much pseudo history, or maybe people don't like history in general. First off, there's memorization. I think in school, a lot of people basically start off in their history classes just memorizing random facts and dates without understanding any historical context to them, which kind of makes it meaningless exercise because then really what you're doing at the end of the day is just trying to regurgitate things for a test, which isn't actually very useful at all, which makes history seem irrelevant and boring. It wasn't until actually I went to the university where I really started to understand how history should be taught and how you should learn history. And that is through not the memorization of random facts and dates that don't mean anything, but rather through studying a topic and researching it, formulating arguments, and then creating a paper or an essay about why you think this is what happened historically based off the best evidence available. That gives you a much better understanding of what's happening historically and also just how the world of history functions in the first place. It's not about people, trying to hide some secrets or whatever in some kind of conspiratorial sense, but rather it's just about people coming together, taking the evidence they have and formulating an argument based on the evidence to have the best historical picture possible of the past. Now, another issue today, which is a major, major problem, that is the number of influencers with really no historical background promoting pseudo history around the world, maybe because they, later on in life became somewhat interested in history and then read a few things online and now they feel like they have the expertise to go and claim lots of different things about the past which don't really have any historical basis. It kind of makes you think about, if you have your toilet is clogged, would you rather call a plumber or just have some random person that claims that they have some special ability to unclog your toilet and that your plumber is hiding this special method and wants to charge you more money or something like that? So at the end of the day, sources matter. You want people that actually really do the research and the work to provide kind of historical information to you rather than some random comedian or podcaster that really doesn't have any background in history and has just essentially made themselves a voice of expertise due to their pre-existing popularity or because they want to be very contrarian and makes lots of claims that get attention. The third part, and this is incredibly important as well today when it comes to the idea of pseudo history, that is listening to government narratives. Governments historically have abused the past in many ways to create basically a historical agenda that fits their government priorities. And so, if you're looking at a dictatorship, you definitely don't want to trust what the dictatorship says about history. Rather, you want to listen to people that have no connection to the dictatorship, that study history objectively, and really don't have any skin in the game, but rather just wants to promote what their evidence says. So knowing bias also matters. If someone works for, a government that's a dictatorship and they start promoting all sorts of crazy historical things that happens to just fit the political policies of the government, that's usually a bad sign that you need to be concerned about. Finally, how to learn history. So first off, just by taking history classes, especially at the university level, where I think you're really going to get exposed to history in a way that makes it actually come to life and where you're actually much more involved with learning about the historical context versus what you probably did growing up when it comes to multiple choice quizzes about historical events and dates. Secondly, it's by conducting historical research, especially whether it's for a class or if you're actually trying to get published on something and having historical experts review your work to make sure that you are doing things as they should. Just like if you were a plumber, you want to go to a trade school that's going to teach you how to be a plumber properly. You have to do the same thing when you're doing historical research because you want to make sure your research is actually legit and you're not just lazy and skipping over details that ultimately fit a narrative that you want to promote. Next, it's reading and listening to historians. After all, these people have dedicated their lives to studying a topic, and that dedication matters. That's not to say that these people might not have opinions or political agendas at times. Certainly, that's been a problem in the field of history, is that there are some professors, for example, that can be kind of more political activists. And that's why it's really important just to kind of see, at what point does their historical arguments fall in line with modern political ideologies. If they're connected to a political party and they're also promoting history, then they may have a political agenda, and therefore their history may be slanted. So having that background knowledge about bias is important. And lastly, it's conducting genealogical research. Knowing about your family history. That's a really important thing when it comes to making history come to life for you as a person. When you know the context of your family within all these different historical events throughout human history, that is incredibly empowering, because then you finally start to learn how history connects to you and how you are a descendant of all these different historical events. And the reason why you exist in the first place is very much tied to these historical events. So the three big aspects of history that you should know, if I were to break it up into the three different kind of fields of history, from my standpoint, is one, big history. Big history takes history beyond the traditional historical viewpoint. We're looking at ancient history to the present, and it focuses on history from the formation of the universe to the present and breaks up in different phases, incorporating things like cosmology, natural history, human origins, prehistory, and combining it with, ancient history, medieval history, uh, and modern history, and then even also looking at where we're headed as a society. So that gives you a really cool big picture context of history and why it's important. And then going into traditional history and focusing more on the specifics of human history from ancient history to the present gives you the greater details that you need to really have a deep understanding of history. And then lastly, it's looking at your ancestry, talking to your family members, seeing what genealogy has been passed down from generation to generation in your family. And then maybe going on a website like ancestry.com and digging into the source material yourself to kind of discover new things about your ancestry and how you fit into the context of human existence and the existence of our entire universe. So at the end of the day, why does this matter? The first thing is, I would say, is that you learn why you exist. Billions of years led to you existing today. So if you have knowledge of big history, you're going to really see how all this connects from each era and time historically. And it's pretty amazing when you think about, 13.8 billion years ago, our universe formed, and here you are today watching this video on YouTube or listening to this as a podcast, and all the things that had to happen for you to be here doing that right now. It is amazing. And it just shows that this is a special moment, that you exist right here. And you should make the most of this. Secondly, you learn how to determine what's most likely to be true. When you have this very diverse understanding of history, it's very easy for you to determine fact versus fiction, because you can start to see how complex the world is. And when the world is very complex, it's the easy answers that are often the ones that are the most inaccurate, because the easy answers are often forced by people with an agenda who want you to believe a certain thing, in many cases because they themselves are insecure, and so they need others to believe what they believe. That way they can feel like they know some hidden truth that no one else knows, when in reality they're just desperate for attention because they themselves are not comfortable in their life. Next, you learn all the different ways that you can overcome problems. If you think about your ancestors and you think about all the things that they had to survive for you to be born, the wars, the plagues, your parents just happening to meet, their parents just happening to meet, and it goes on and on and on. Life is going to throw constant issues at you. That's just how the game works. But at the same time, your ancestry is a reflection of what you were capable of. As human beings, we're incredibly good at adapting to change. That's why our species has existed for 300,000 years. And if you embrace the fact that your ancestors had to overcome all these things, who's to say that you can as well? After all, their DNA lives on in you. They are a part of you. So don't give up on yourself. And so with that, at the end of the day, learning history helps you make the most of your life because every day your story is still being written. And so, you got a lot of pages left. You're still alive, you're still kicking here, trying to make sense of your own existence. So who's to say you can't do what you want to do with your life? So with that, thank you for listening. And as always, remember, billions of years led to you. So make the most of it.